Your Honors, I am James McCulloch, representing the Second Bank of the United States. We are here today because the state of Maryland has imposed a tax on our bank, which we believe is unconstitutional. The Second Bank of the United States should not be subject to taxation.
The first Bank of the United States was shut down in March 1811, leading to a significant economic downfall. In April 1816, President Madison signed the bill creating the Second Bank of the United States. However, the operations of the first bank had sedated the success of our state bank. Therefore, we passed a law to tax the Second Bank of the United States.
The Maryland State Court has ruled that the Second Bank of the United States is unconstitutional. However, we contend that the Constitution grants the federal government the right to establish a bank.
The Constitution does not explicitly grant the federal government the authority to establish a bank. Our state has the right to impose taxes on institutions operating within its borders.
The federal government has implied powers under the Necessary and Proper Clause of Act Article 1, Section 8. Establishing a national bank is essential for carrying out its enumerated powers, such as coining money and regulating its value.
This tax is necessary to protect our state banks and ensure fair competition. The Second Bank's operations have already harmed our local economy.
Taxing the Second Bank undermines the federal government's ability to maintain a stable and national economy. We must look beyond the state interests and consider broader implications for our country. Your Honors, the Second Bank of the United States is a federal institution established under the authority granted by the Necessary and Proper Clause of Article 1, Section 8. This clause allows Congress to pass laws essential for executing these enumerated powers, including coining money and regulating its values. Taxing the bank undermines these federal powers and disrupts national economic ability.
Although the states hold the power to tax, they do not have the power to tax federal institutions. The constitutionality of the Second Bank is upheld by the Necessary Proper Clause. This clause grants Congress the authority to establish a bank as means as to carry out the enumerated powers.
Thank you, Your Honor. This ruling assures the stability and functionality of our national economy.
The ruling of the lower court is overruled. The Second Bank of the United States is constitutional. The elastic clause relating to Article 1, Section 8, Clause 5 affirms the United States shall have the right to coin money and regulate its value. The supremacy of the federal law over the state law is upheld. The Second Bank of the United States shall operate without state interference.
Fellow citizens, we need to understand what this ruling means. The Supreme Court has said the Second Bank is legal, but this changes how power is shared between the state and federal governments. Our state banks now have to compete with a strong federal bank.
Yeah, the Second Bank is here to help create a stable national currency and support economic growth. This ruling shows that the federal government has powers beyond what is written within the Constitution, and it also changes how we see federalism.
Yes, the ruling means that the federal laws are stronger than state laws when they conflict. This gives the federal government the power to do what it needs to do, even if it's not specifically mentioned in the Constitution.
Exactly. This decision confirms federal law is the highest law, and the federal government has broad powers. It can take necessary actions for the nation's stability and growth, like creating a national bank. This is a big change in how we see federalism.
We have a lot to discuss and many changes to make, but for the sake of our citizens, we must find a way to move forward together. This ruling will shape how state and federal governments work together for years to come.
Agreed. Let's work towards a future where both state and federal institutions thrive, ensuring the prosperity of our great nation. By understanding and adapting to these new balance of power, we create a stronger, more resilient economy and government. Thank you. At this time, we would like to welcome any questions from the media. I'll start with you.
How do you think this ruling will impact the balance of power between the state and federal governments?
This ruling clearly establishes that federal laws take precedence over state laws when there is conflict. It means the federal government has broader powers than previously understood, which will shift the balance towards the federal level. Any other questions? I'll go with you.
What does this ruling mean for the interpretation of the Constitution?
You want to answer?
Yeah.
Yeah, so the ruling demonstrates that the federal government has implied powers beyond those explicitly stated in the Constitution, and it confirms that the federal government can take necessary actions to ensure the nation's stability and growth. Thank you all for y'all's questions.